The wine glass was still warm. That's the first thing I noticed when I walked into the kitchen. Not the faint trail of her perfume in the hallway. Not the slightly crooked painting on the wall. The one she always straightens before she leaves. Not even the fact that both dogs were in their crates when I never put them there. Just the wine glass. Half a swirl left of deep red Cabernet, smudge of lipstick on the rim. Her favorite glass, the one with the tiny chip on the bottom she refuses to throw out. Still warm. Which meant recent. But Noel was supposed to be at work. Working late tonight. Don't worry, Red Heart. That's what she texted me at 5:42 p.m. It was 6:17 when I got home. The lights were off. No car in the driveway. But this glass, it wasn't cold. It was alive. And so was my suspicion. I walked through the house like I was trespassing in my own life. Something was off. You know that weird sixth sense your brain triggers when you're in danger? That tiny, useless warning sign that shows up after the car crash? I had that. Full throttle. Every drawer in the hallway closed, but one sock drawer in the bedroom slightly open. One of her perfume bottles missing from the bathroom shelf. And the weirdest part? Her iPad, the one she never leaves home without, left face down on the bed, still on. I tapped the screen. Open browser. Google Maps. And not just maps. A route. From our house to a restaurant I'd never been to. A place called Aldergrove, downtown, fancy, candlelight-only kind of place. 7 stars, reservation required, overpriced appetizers. And the route had been tapped recently. It even showed 23 minutes ago, next to the estimated drive time. She'd been here. But why lie about it? I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at that glowing screen like it held some ancient secret. Then I grabbed my phone and typed. Didn't know your office moved to a restaurant. I sent it. No follow-up. No explanation. Just that. And within seconds, she read it. Typing. Typing stopped. Then she called. I didn't answer. She called again. Left a voicemail. I didn't check it. Then came the messages. Wait, what? Where are you? Brett, what are you doing? But I wasn't doing anything. Not yet. I just sat in the dim bedroom, waiting. And 13 minutes later, I know because I watched every second, I heard her keys at the door. She rushed in. Not like someone casually getting home from a long day at work. No, like someone who realized she left the stove on and her lies out in the open. She came around the corner into the bedroom, heels in hand, jacket slipping off her shoulder, face flushed with panic. And the first thing she said? Not hi. Not I can explain. Nope. She looked at the glowing iPad screen, looked at me, and said, Why are you in my stuff? That was the moment everything shifted. Not because of what she said, but because of what was about to happen, and what she wasn't expecting to find. When she stepped into the bedroom, her face was the color of wet paper. The kind of pale you only see when someone knows the game is up, but still hopes they can bluff their way through it. The first words out of her mouth weren't even denial, or fear, or apology. They were, Why are you in my stuff? Her voice was sharp, like she wanted to regain control instantly by flipping the guilt on me. And for a second, just a second, I almost fell for it. That's what being married to someone like Noel does to you. You second guess even when the truth is staring you dead in the face. I didn't answer her right away. I just tilted the iPad toward her and raised an eyebrow. The glowing screen still showed the restaurant route. The little blue line stretched from our house to Aldergrove. The second she saw it, she froze. I swear I heard the faintest hitch in her breath. But then she recovered, too quickly. She sat down on the bed, careful, deliberate, like an actress walking into her scene. She brushed her hair back, took one long sigh, and said, Brett, you've got it all wrong. That sentence, that exact sentence, was her first mistake. Because the one thing you should never say to a man who just caught you in a lie is that he's imagining things. That phrase was a blade, and she wielded it like she'd done this before. It wasn't fear in her eyes anymore. It was calculation. She was already rewriting the narrative, already preparing to spin me in circles until I doubted myself. And I could feel it happening. My brain was buzzing with 100 questions, but my mouth was dry, my voice quiet. You weren't at work? I whispered, sounding more like a child than a husband. You told me you were working late. She leaned forward, hands outstretched, her tone softening. Brett, listen. It was a client dinner. That's all. I didn't want to explain the details because I knew you'd overthink it. You always do. She placed her hand on mine, as if the warmth of her skin could erase the evidence glowing inches away. I almost let her. Almost. But then I noticed something. On her wrist, faint and shiny under the bedroom light. A smear of lip gloss. Not hers. Too bright, too metallic. Whoever she was with, she'd been close enough to leave marks. I pulled my hand away. My chest was tight, my throat burning, but my voice came out steady, which surprised even me. Who was he? She blinked, pretended not to understand, shook her head like I was crazy. But her silence was louder than any confession. I could hear her pulse in the air, see her mind racing. And then she made her second mistake. She stood up too quickly, snatched the iPad from the bed, and slammed it shut. Enough, she snapped, her voice cracking for the first time. You're being paranoid. Paranoid. That word echoed in my skull like a gunshot. How many times had she used it? How many times had I let it slide? Every late night, every missing call, every weird perfume excuse. It all boiled down to her calling me paranoid, as though it was my problem and not hers. And maybe that's when something inside me snapped. I got up, walked past her without another word, and headed straight to the kitchen. I didn't know what I was looking for, but my body moved on its own. And then I saw it again, the wine glass. Still there, still half full. And next to it, a second glass, almost empty, with a faint fingerprint on the stem that wasn't mine. I pointed at it when she followed me down the hall. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me, and I swear in that moment she looked like a cornered animal. But instead of caving, she tried to laugh. Oh my God, Brett, are you serious? You think I had someone here? Do you hear yourself? You're losing it. But the crack in her voice betrayed her. She hadn't expected me to notice the second glass. She hadn't planned for that detail. And that, right there, was her unraveling. The calm, composed Noel who always had an explanation ready. She was slipping, and I wasn't going to stop watching her fall. I picked up the second glass, turned it slowly in my hand, and said the one thing I knew would keep her awake at night. Then whose fingerprint is this? And that's when her mask finally cracked. She didn't answer my question. Not with words, anyway. Instead, she blinked 3 times in quick succession, something she always did when her brain was scrambling for a lie. Her lips parted slightly, like a response was forming, but it stalled somewhere between her pride and her panic. I held the wine glass out just a little closer, not to taunt her, but because I wanted her to see what I was seeing. A literal, physical ghost of the person she'd invited into our home, while I was too busy trusting her to notice the shift. Noel finally spoke. I had a meeting. I wanted a more comfortable setting. It was just drinks, Brett. That glass. She gestured vaguely toward it, not even brave enough to touch it. That's from one of the venue reps. We went over some slides and talked strategy. That's all. I stared at her like I was seeing a stranger. You held a business meeting in our kitchen? Yes. She nodded, too quickly. It was last minute. I didn't think you'd mind. You told me you were working late, I said, my voice flat, emotionless, like I was speaking through a fog. I was working late. This was work. Her voice cracked again at the word was, and that was enough. Enough to light the match on everything I'd buried under a mountain of patience. Enough to ignite the quiet rage I'd been nursing for months without knowing it. The late nights. The silent phone calls. The excuses stacked so high they started collapsing under their own weight. It had never been about trust, I realized. It was about being too afraid to admit that she'd been building a second life while I was folding our laundry and planning our weekend groceries. I placed the wine glass down gently, like it was made of something more delicate than glass, like it was the last remnant of my old reality. Then I turned away from her and opened the cabinet above the fridge. It was high up, where she never looked, where I kept things she didn't know I still had. Like the backup hard drive from my old job. And my trail camera. Yeah, a trail camera. Funny how something meant for catching raccoons knocking over trash cans became the one thing that might just end my marriage. See, I'd mounted it outside the guest room window a few months ago when we had that string of break-ins on our street. I told her it was just temporary, that I'd take it down. She forgot all about it. But I didn't. And the angle? Perfectly caught the driveway and a sliver of the kitchen window, just enough to see who was coming and going when I wasn't home. I plugged it into my laptop on the kitchen island. Noel stood behind me, frozen, not moving, not breathing, from what I could tell. She asked quietly, "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. Not yet. The camera had a motion-activated archive. The most recent clip was from last Thursday. I clicked it. There she was, in her black jeans, white blouse, hair up, walking out the front door with a man behind her. Tall, shaved head, leather jacket. She looked over her shoulder, smiled at him, then laughed, as he smacked her gently on the backside with a rolled-up folder. She touched his face for a second before unlocking her car. My hands went cold on the trackpad. I turned the laptop around. Is this your venue rep? She gasped, audibly. No, that's not. He's not who you think. You're right, I said. He's worse. She started crying. No tears yet, just the sharp, ugly inhale women do when they realize the act has ended and the audience isn't clapping anymore. She reached for the laptop, and I pulled it back. Don't, I said. Just don't. She collapsed onto the stool at the counter, covered her face with both hands, and finally, said the one word I'd been waiting for all night. I'm sorry, but here's the thing. Sorry doesn't undo fingerprints. It doesn't explain laughter. And it doesn't clean lipstick off a wine glass. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since I met Noel, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, clean detachment, like I was watching a fire from across the street, knowing the house was already gone. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't even going to argue. Because the truth is, she wasn't afraid I'd catch her. She was afraid I'd stop caring that I did. Noel sat hunched on the stool like a collapsed umbrella, closed, tense, and still dripping guilt. The moment she said, I'm sorry, the kitchen seemed to grow a second layer of silence. Not just the awkward kind. It was loaded, dense with all the things she wasn't saying, and too many of the things I'd ignored. I didn't respond. I let the silence fill the space between us because I knew that's where the truth lived. She couldn't hide behind words if I didn't give her a conversation to hijack. After a long stretch of nothing, she tried again. It didn't mean anything, Brett. That was the next move in her playbook. Downplay it. Shrink the betrayal into something harmless. Package it neatly in a cliché. I almost laughed. She sounded like someone quoting lines from a movie she hadn't finished watching. You brought him into our home. My voice came out lower than I expected. Not angry, just factual. He sat in our kitchen, drank from our glasses. The dogs didn't even bark, which means he's been here before. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was doing all the shouting for me. She flinched when I said the word dogs, like it reminded her that even they knew something I didn't. It was emotional at first, she whispered, as if that somehow softened it. I needed someone to talk to. Noel, I said, setting the laptop aside. You have me to talk to. That's literally all I've ever done for you. Listen. Support. Hold space. Cover for your mistakes. Carry the weight when you wanted to chase dreams. Don't insult me by saying this was about talking. Her eyes went glassy, but no tears fell. I noticed that. She was performing sorrow, not feeling it. There's a difference. Real regret looks messy. It's ugly and raw and can't be managed. But Noel? She was still carefully presenting her guilt like it needed to be digestible. You were always so stable, she murmured, as if that were some flaw she just couldn't work around. Sometimes I felt like I was just floating next to your predictability. That line right there? That was the one that lit the final fuse. Predictable? I scoffed. Is that what you call being loyal? Predictable? Because I came home every day without anyone else's perfume on me? Because I didn't lie when I said I was working late? She winced like I'd slapped her, but I didn't let up. I gave you a life where you never had to wonder if I loved you. You didn't have to snoop through my phone or track my location or second-guess my loyalty. And you took that for granted because you thought you'd always have it. I didn't plan for it to go this far, she said, finally standing up like she was trying to reassert some control over the conversation. It just happened. One night turned into a few. Then he started texting. And then you brought him here. I finished for her. She looked away. That's when I did something unexpected. I walked past her, down the hall, into our bedroom. I opened the closet, grabbed one of the small suitcases she used for weekend trips, and began packing. Not for me. For her. She followed me after about 30 seconds, standing in the doorway like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Brett, what are you doing? I'm giving you a window, I said, folding her clothes with a kind of mechanical calm. One chance to leave with some grace. Before I lose what's left of my ability to stay civil. She stepped forward. Wait, what? You're kicking me out? No. You kicked yourself out. I'm just helping you follow through. She stared at the suitcase as if it were a bomb she didn't know how to defuse. Where am I supposed to go? I paused, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, I assume the restaurant guy has a spare key somewhere. You trusted him with me. I'm sure you can trust him with a couch. Her face fell, finally, cracking into something that looked real. But I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt sick, tired, like I was finally waking up after months of emotional anesthesia. You're serious, she said, her voice shaking. I'm not just serious, I replied. I'm done. She didn't leave. I packed the suitcase, zipped it up, placed it neatly by the door, and she still didn't move. She just stood there, arms crossed, mouth trembling, staring at it like it was her own casket. When I reminded her that she had somewhere else to be, she finally cracked, not with anger, but with a kind of quiet desperation that made my stomach churn. Brett, I don't have anywhere to go, she said, her voice small. That's not my problem anymore. I replied coldly, and I meant it. For once, I meant every syllable. But she didn't move. Instead, she sat down on the couch like she lived here, like nothing had happened. Then came the tears. Real ones this time. Wet, ugly sobs. She buried her face in her hands and whispered, I messed up. I messed up everything. I stayed quiet. I didn't comfort her. I didn't kneel. I didn't ask why. I'd done enough of that for years. But she kept talking. I was scared. You were always so put together. And I kept making mistakes. The credit cards. The overdrafts. The debt. You fixed everything. You always fix everything, Brett. And her voice cracked. I didn't want you to see how bad it got again. And that's when my heart started beating faster. Not because of the guilt, but because of the way my brain suddenly connected two things I hadn't thought about until that very moment. A couple of months ago, I noticed a strange transaction on our joint checking account. $4,500 gone in one sweep. She told me it was a down payment for a vendor, part of an emergency venue cancellation. I didn't ask for details. I believed her. But right now, in this moment, with her voice shaking and her secrets unraveling like cheap thread, I knew that money had nothing to do with the venue. What did you do with that money? I asked, eyes narrowing. The $4,500. She froze, and that was all the answer I needed. But I waited. I wanted to hear her say it. She looked up, tears streaming, makeup streaked across her cheeks like smudged guilt, and said something I'll never forget. I gave it to him. I blinked. You what? He told me his business was struggling. He was behind on rent for his office space. He said if I could just help him bridge the gap, he'd pay it back within 2 weeks. It wasn't, she wiped her eyes. It wasn't supposed to be from our account, Brett. I was going to move the money back after the bonus hit, but then I got passed over again and I walked into the hallway before she could finish the sentence. I needed air. I needed oxygen. I felt like I was drowning in a house I built brick by brick. This wasn't just cheating anymore. It was theft. It was betrayal on a level that money can't measure. She'd used my name to pay for her affair. She'd taken our savings to prop up his rent. While I was meal prepping and filing taxes, she was financing her boyfriend's struggling business with the paycheck I worked 12-hour days to earn. I sat down on the edge of the stairs, head in my hands, nausea crawling through my chest. I heard her footsteps behind me. Then her voice again, softer now. I'll get it back. I'll fix this. I laughed. Quiet, bitter. You can't fix this with a Venmo transfer, Noel. She sat next to me, close enough for me to feel her shiver. She reached for my hand, and I pulled away like her skin burned. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said again, like it was a defense. But it did, I replied. And now it's a crime. You understand that, right? You gave my money to someone else. Without telling me. And not for business. Not for rent. For him. She started sobbing again. But I was done being her emotional sinkhole. You need to leave, I said, standing up. You need to pack yourself, because if I touch another one of your things, I'm not going to be able to stay calm. Brett, please, she started, but I was already walking away. And then she screamed after me, not words, just a sound. Desperate, furious. But buried in that scream was something that caught my ear. A single phrase. He said he was going to pay it back. That was her third mistake. Because now I wanted to meet the man who borrowed my money to sleep with my wife. And I wasn't interested in getting paid back. I was interested in something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even sit. I just paced the house like I was walking through the ashes of a fire I didn't start, trying to recognize what was left. Every framed picture, every kitchen drawer, every blanket on the couch felt like it had been tainted, like it belonged to another couple entirely. A better version of us that only ever existed in my head. Noel was in the guest room. I told her not to talk to me. She tried twice. Knocked once. Whispered something through the door. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My brain wasn't processing sound. It was running calculations. Connections. Motives. Timelines. I kept going back to the $4,500. Back to that name she slipped between sobs like it meant nothing. He said he was going to pay it back. That's all I had. But that was enough. The next morning, I waited until she left the house. I heard her car start and roll down the driveway. I watched from the upstairs window, not because I didn't trust she was actually leaving, but because I wanted to see her face. And what I saw wasn't guilt. It was fear, not of me, but of what might happen next, of what I might do now that I was no longer under her spell. As soon as she was gone, I went straight to her iPad. She'd forgotten it again. Or maybe she left it on purpose, hoping I'd find something to prove her story. Either way, it was unlocked, and she was still logged into her email. Took less than 5 minutes to find him. His name was Declan Avery. A series of emails between them dated back over 5 months, all labeled with vague subject lines like schedule, quick draft, and my personal favorite, you free tonight? I clicked. Read. Clicked again. It wasn't just an affair. They were talking like partners. Plotting things. Trading ideas about building a brand, merging his consulting services with her marketing skills. She wasn't just cheating on me romantically, she was collaborating with him. Scheming. Pitching herself as an asset. There were even PDFs, mock-ups for websites, domain names they were considering, invoices she was drafting under a fake LLC. I scrolled further until I found it. An email labeled Initial Transfer. It had the exact bank routing information she used for the $4,500 withdrawal. But here's what really caught me. The footer of the email had a company name. Whalen Strategies. I opened a new tab. Googled it. The results were non-existent. No website. No LinkedIn profile. No contact info. Just a few mentions on old message boards, all saying the same thing. Scammer. Smooth talker. Watch your money. My stomach dropped. I dug deeper. Found an archived Facebook group from 2021 warning about freelance fraud in the event planning industry. One post said, guy goes by different names, Declan, Avery, DJ, even used Whalen as a first name once. Promises networking deals, collects upfront, disappears. This wasn't just some charming loser who flirted with my wife. This was a career con artist, and she handed him our money with both hands. I stared at the screen, shaking. Not because I was scared. Not because I was even mad at Declan. I was shaking because the woman I had defended, protected, and built a life with had allowed herself to become the perfect victim and then drag me down with her. But it gets worse. I opened one more email. A forward she had sent from her personal to her work address. Subject line. Declan, urgent. In it, she wrote, if Brett ever finds out, I'll lose everything. Please stop calling the house. We need to talk in person. I can't keep lying for you. Dated 2 weeks ago. So not only had she lied to me, she had started lying to him. And the cracks between her two realities were beginning to show. Suddenly, the idea of revenge didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary. I wrote down his last known address from one of the invoices she had scanned. It was local, not more than 20 minutes away. A P.O. box in a shared co-working space downtown. No phone number. No social media. Just a name that probably wasn't even real. But it was enough. I was going to find him. Not to fight. Not to scream. Not even to confront. I just wanted to look him in the eye. The man who took my money. The man who took my wife. The man who had no idea that someone like me, predictable, soft-spoken Brett, had finally stopped playing nice. I drove downtown the next afternoon, my palms slick on the steering wheel the entire way. I told myself I wasn't doing anything stupid, just collecting information. That's what I repeated over and over. Information. Not revenge, not confrontation. Just facts. But the truth was buzzing in the back of my head like a hornet. If I saw him, if I actually came face to face with the man who smiled across from my wife over candlelight while I ate reheated leftovers, I didn't know what I'd do. The address on the invoice led me to a glass building with a modern lobby and one of those fake plants so perfectly green it looked smug. It wasn't a business, not really. It was a shared space for freelancers and entrepreneurs. People rented mailboxes and meeting rooms, dressed themselves up as companies they weren't. I stood there staring at the board of tenants until my eyes landed on it. Wayland Strategies, Suite 204. I didn't expect it to actually be there, but there it was, in neat printed font. I climbed the stairs, every step heavier than the last. My heart was pounding so hard I thought people passing by could hear it. When I reached the suite, the door was locked. A frosted glass panel let me see shadows inside. A desk, 2 chairs, a stack of folders. I knocked once, waited, then knocked again. Silence. But just as I was about to turn around, a woman's voice behind me said, "Are you looking for Declan?" I turned. She was mid-40s, carrying a laptop bag, tired eyes, but sharp. She looked me over like she already knew I wasn't supposed to be here. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Do you know him?" She let out a humorless laugh. "Everyone here knows him. Or at least we thought we did." She shifted the strap on her shoulder. "If you're here to get your money back, you're not the first." Her words knocked the air out of me. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "He ran a few networking programs out of this suite. Promised small businesses exposure, contacts, all that. Took deposits up front. Then disappeared. Last I heard, he cleared out the place 2 nights ago. Didn't even tell the building manager." The world tilted under me. 2 nights ago. That was right after I confronted Noel. Which meant while she was unraveling in our kitchen, crying about mistakes, Declan was already packing up and vanishing. I pressed further. "Do you have any idea where he went?" She shook her head. "No one does. But if you're smart, you'll cut your losses. He changes names like most people change shirts. You'll never track him unless you're ready to waste years chasing a ghost." Years. The word stung. Because I had already wasted years. On my marriage, on blind faith, on playing the dependable husband while Noel was bankrolling a fraud. My stomach knotted, not just with anger at him, but with something darker. She hadn't just betrayed me with another man. She had betrayed me with this. A man who wasn't even real in the way she believed he was. I thanked the woman and walked back down the stairs. Every step felt heavier, like I was carrying something I couldn't drop. When I reached the street, I sat in my car for almost half an hour, staring at the wheel. Declan was gone. Untouchable. But the damage he left wasn't his alone. Because now I knew something Noel didn't. She thought he was her secret. She thought he was her lover, her partner, her ticket to something bigger. But what she really had was a man with 100 names and no face. A parasite who drained her and moved on. And when I told her that, when I showed her that the man she chose over me was nothing more than a hollow scam, it wouldn't save her. It would destroy her. For the first time since all of this started, I realized I didn't need to raise my voice, or fight, or throw her out. The cruelest revenge was simpler than that. All I had to do was tell her the truth, and watch her collapse under the weight of her own choices. When I got home, the suitcase was still sitting by the door, untouched, just like the apology she'd whispered through the walls the night before. The house smelled like lemon cleaner, the desperate kind of scrubbing people do when they're trying to reset the past. I walked in without a word. She was in the kitchen again, like nothing had happened, like the last 2 days were just a bad dream she could mop away. Noel turned as soon as she heard the door close. Her face lit up with this fragile hope, like she thought maybe I'd changed my mind. Maybe we could fix things with a conversation and some tears. "Brett," she started, stepping toward me. I cut her off. Calm. Measured. Not cruel, just finished. "He's gone." She stopped cold. "What?" "Declan," I said, setting the printed emails and invoice copies on the counter like evidence at a trial. "Wayland Strategies was never real. He's not who you thought. He's done this to others. He took your money, and he's not coming back." Noel's eyes widened. "No, that can't be. He wouldn't just." "He did." I let that sink in. Let her sit in the silence. "And he's not the only one who disappeared. So did the version of you I thought I married." Her hands trembled as she looked through the printouts. "I didn't know. I swear to God. Brett, I didn't know he was like that. I thought we were building something." "We were," I replied. "But not the same thing." She dropped into the chair by the counter, her face crumpling. I lost everything. And for once, I didn't rush to tell her otherwise. Because it was true. But the surprising thing was, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. For the first time in years, the noise in my head was gone. The second guessing, the overthinking, the walking on eggshells. It all evaporated in that moment, like steam off a shattered pot. There was nothing left to save, and for the first time, I didn't want to. I grabbed the suitcase and rolled it gently to the door. I booked you a hotel for the next 3 nights. After that, you figure it out. I already removed you from the joint accounts. I'll call the lawyer Monday. She didn't argue. Not this time. Just nodded, like she was finally out of rehearsed lines. On her way out, she stopped. Are you really just done? I looked her in the eye. No, I'm just starting. And I meant it. 3 months later, I stood in the same kitchen, but everything felt different. I replaced the old table with a wooden butcher block I built myself. Got a new couch. Repainted the bedroom. The space felt lighter, like the ghosts had finally left. My days were quieter now, but better. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, started hiking again, even took a pottery class on Saturday mornings just to touch something that wasn't made of lies. One morning, as I was leaving for a coffee run, I found an envelope at my door. No stamp, no return address. Just my name in her handwriting. I didn't open it. I slid it into the back of the drawer with the old anniversary cards and the dried-out pins and the broken promises. Some things don't need closure. Some things are the closure. As I walked out into the sunlight, keys in hand, I realized something that stopped me on the porch. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was free. And this time, I wasn't coming home to someone else's lie. I was finally living my own truth.